Hello and welcome to lesson 0 of our complex numbers unit. This is our honors unit. So in today's lesson, we're just going to go into what are kind of like complex numbers. And so to understand that, we're going to go over our number system. And so, as you can see, it's a bunch of bubbles on your paper. It's because it's encompassing the previous one. So your smallest bubble is your smallest number set. And so these are your natural numbers. Okay, so these are also known as your counting numbers. And so those are 1, 2, 3, and so on. Like you can physically count them. Okay, then in your bigger bubble, let me highlight it. So this is going to encompass your natural numbers. These are your whole numbers. Oopsies, I'll use a different color. Let's use purple. These are your whole numbers. And whole numbers are all your counting numbers. Counting numbers and 0. So what it looks like is 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then with using all of that, and then we're going to add a new set of numbers or more to it, we have our integers. And so that's all of your negative numbers. So negative counting numbers, counting 0, and your counting numbers. And so that is going to be like ... -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, and then we have rational numbers. Now, we've used rational a lot. That's anything that can be written as a rational number. And so that's everything encompassing all of your natural numbers, our whole numbers, our integers. And so rational numbers, that's anything that can be written as a fraction. Can be written as a fraction. Okay, so that's going to be like 1/2. That's going to be 0.3 repeating. Let's see, 5, 2/3. Those are all rational because we can write them as a fraction. So I'm going to write rational. Now, our next bubble is outside of this. This is its own bubble. These are going to be your irrational numbers. Okay, so irrational is anything that's not a fraction. Anything that's not a fraction. If I can spell fraction right, or at least make it look right. Fraction. Okay, so that's like the square root of 3. Pi. 2 rad 3. Those are all irrational numbers. And then these are all part of the real number system. Okay, this is your real number system. And it's a combination of them. And so like your example, so that's going to be real, rational, and irrational numbers together. So that's like 2 plus or minus the square root of 4. You have a real number added to an irrational number. So what we're looking now is our new pieces, imaginary and complex. So imaginary is this bubble all the way by itself. These are your imaginary numbers. And so for imaginary, we use I. So it could be I, it could be 5i. Where it comes from, it is the square root of -1. Okay, so like before this, we would say we cannot take the square root of -1. But that's because we weren't working in the, we were only working in the real number system. So imaginary numbers is the square root of -1. And then finally, let's see, ooh, purple. Our final one is our complex. Now this is that entire box. This is your complex number system, and it looks like a plus bi. What it is, it's a real number and an imaginary number combined together. So a complex number is a real and imaginary number together. Okay. So what we're going to do on the next page is we are just going to identify where our numbers land. So if you've ever heard of like a square is a rectangle, or all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares, this is kind of like the number system. All counting numbers are complex, but not all complex numbers are counting numbers, okay? And so what we're going to do is I'm going to use a highlighter. I would suggest grabbing a highlighter to make it a little bit faster. So -3, that is an integer. So that means it's an integer, it's a rational number, it's a real number, and it's complex. Okay, that's where that number falls in. Okay, then we have 7/4. Well, that's a fraction, so it means it's a rational number. Then it's real, and it's complex. We're kind of like following this. You got to work from the bottom up. Okay, so then we have -pi. -pi is irrational, but it's real and it's complex. If you haven't figured out already, every one of these is going to be complex. 3 rad 5, again, it's irrational, but it's real and it's complex. 2i, well, the fact it has I, it means it's imaginary, but it's just I, so that's why it's just imaginary and complex. 6 is a special one. It's a natural number, which means it's a whole number, which means it's an integer, which means it's rational, which means it's real, which means it's complex. It's not irrational because it can be written as a fraction, and it's not imaginary because it's not I. And then 0, this one, be very careful of. 0 is just a whole number, integer, rational, real, complex. It's not a natural number. It's not naturally occurring. And then our last one, this is a real number and an imaginary number together, so it is only complex. And so that is kind of our introduction into our unit. We're going to be learning more about imaginary and complex numbers in our next lesson.